Hey everyone, how's it going? If you are shopping around for PPF quotes and you notice that there's a wide range of differences between insanely cheap and really expensive, I'm gonna break that down for you and show you why it's a mistake to go for the insanely cheap option. And if you're a PPF install shop, I'm going to break down some costs and show you why long-term offering these ridiculously cheap prices is going to hurt your shop. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the crazy quotes we've seen recently, as well as a car that I did recently. And I'm going to break down those costs for you, and I'm going to show you all about it right here. So I'm in Central Texas. I'm about an hour north of Austin. I'm not going to mention any names of shops because it's not really about bashing a shop or complaining about a shop. We're going to charge our prices regardless, and they're going to charge their prices regardless. But I want to help educate, hopefully, a client who is maybe considering shopping based on price only and doesn't realize, what the difference in price is. And I'm going to hopefully educate some shops that, are charging way too little and kind of devaluing themselves. And hopefully we can all bring up together here and get quality work for quality prices and get everybody satisfied. Everybody wins in this situation. Now, one of the things that you'll hear people say if you're in the professional Facebook groups and what have you is, different markets charge different prices and saturation and all that stuff. And if you are treating yourself where price is the only important thing, that may be true because everybody is trying to race to the bottom of prices, but we're not, in that case, selling a lot of our value and what sets a shop apart compared to just shopping solely on price. Now the interesting thing is one of the main costs of PPF installation is the ever increasing cost of the PPF raw materials itself. Now about a year and a half ago or so, that there was 4 quarters in a row where my PPF prices in a previous company that I worked with raised about 5% quarter over quarter, which is obviously compounded. And we had another increase this year. So, we've had 4 or 5 increases, and pretty much standard from what I've seen from a lot of different brands, they all raise the prices. Now check this out. You can say that pricing is different per market, but the raw material price doesn't change. If you are a dealer for any of the major PPF brands, they're not going to give you a discount on your PPF raw material because you live in Austin, for example, compared to a small town, and you're going to get charged a different price. Everybody's getting pretty much, some companies do offer discounts for more purchases, but by and large, you are getting the same exact price as everybody else. So, while the people are saying that the market dictates the pricing, the market certainly doesn't dictate the pricing for the raw material. So that's important to understand. Okay, so we've all heard the term race to the bottom pricing. And why generally do people make the mistake of race to the bottom pricing? Well, what generally happens is, people are trying to compete with other shops, and so their first inclination is to undercut another shop. And like I said, by and large, and I'm going to go over specific numbers, but by and large, all the major brands with good warranties and good reputation are in a certain range of raw material pricing. So people rush to undercut. And why do they do that? Because they want to take the business, right? They want to sell somebody based on price only and not quality. So to stay in business from one shop to the next, the person who is, kind of steadfast in their pricing and the other person who is going to constantly undercut, how can you stay profitable by undercutting constantly? And the way you do that is you have to cut corners. Now you have to cut corners in some form or fashion, and it could be anywhere from a poorer quality install, a rushed install, less preparation, less skilled installers. It could be, less attention to detail, less customer service before, during, or after the fact, because customer service takes time. Time is money. It could be, swapping out a cheaper brand of film, but advertising a higher brand. I mean, there's only certain ways you can cut corners. Your rent's going to remain the same, you know, and all that stuff. So you either got to hire cheaper labor or you got to skimp on time, because if you are using the material you say you're using and it's in one of those top brands, you're going to, you know, that is not going to change just because you undercut somebody. Now, one of the things I've seen some shops do is, you know, they advertise a typical package, but then maybe they remove some pieces from the package. For example, on our full front, which is hood, fenders, mirrors, and front bumper, you know, there are oftentimes minor trim pieces on the front bumper. And by and large, you know, our full front package does include those trim pieces within reason. You know, some cars have an insane amount of trim pieces and there may be a slight upcharge, but by and large it includes those trim pieces. So on a C8 Corvette, for example, I do almost all the carbon flash pieces on the front in the bottom portion of the bumper. So, you know, another way that you could cut costs is to completely eliminate that. And then on a C8 Corvette, you know, you're going to be eliminating a lot of pieces and a lot of coverage. So all that black carbon flash trim is now going to show rock chips, which are going to be white. So, you know, there's only certain ways that you can cut those costs to meet that undercut. Now for the client, what does that mean for you? Well, that means that, you know, you're potentially getting a subpar work. Maybe your installer doesn't stick around for very long, you know, to handle issues because, you know, they've undercut so much to the point where either A, their reputation has suffered because the quality has gone down and they go out of business, or, you know, the profitability just isn't there and they go out of business. So, you know, that could present an issue for you. You could have cut corners on your vehicle, you know, maybe your edges aren't wrapped, you know, maybe just the install quality is incredibly poor. And, you know, I have a whole nother video on that I've talked about in the past with a cheap PPF install where you could tell that the shop, you know, put the PPF on and then wash their hands. Like there was hours of work that were skipped from the final product that could have made the installation probably 50% better than it appeared for the client. So everybody's going to suffer with the undercutting and the lower cost quality. Now, if price is the only thing that matters to you, and you just want to slap some protection on your car for cheap, you know, that doesn't matter. But the vast majority of my clients are looking for a quality installation, not necessarily perfection, but, you know, they're looking for quality, they're looking for customer service, and, you know, that comes at a cost. And so a quote that I read about Race to the Bottom pricing, I'm just going to read it. It says, "Moreover, consumer expectations of even lower prices may mean that the eventual victor finds profit margins permanently squeezed. If consumers confront poor quality goods or services as a result of cost cutting during the race to the bottom, the market for those goods or services could dry up." Now, what does that mean in layman's terms? What that means is, if by and large the industry is constantly undercutting, constantly racing to the bottom, constantly cutting corners and sacrificing quality, over time the industry in that area becomes so permanently damaged from a reputation standpoint that consumers are hesitant to even buy the product because they've had such negative experience and they read such negative experiences. If you've ever looked at products, maybe you're looking for something or you're looking for a service, and every single review that you find, it's like the worst. Well, that makes you hesitant to even do the project, right? And for us, you know, in some areas, in our area, you know, general contracting can be tough. And so we've had so many bad experiences personally with contractors and things of that nature that anytime I have a project that would require a contractor, I'm immediately hesitant to even complete the project, even though I want it done, you know. I had, one example is, you know, we were trying to expand our pantry, which required cutting a hole in the wall and moving some plumbing into the sides of the walls. Well, we needed a plumber to move those, licensed plumber to move those pipes into the wall. And Every plumber that came out, I accepted their estimate. I asked them to start immediately, and they would not show up. Or they would come out to do the estimate and say, I don't feel like doing it. And it's like, why did you even come out? Or they wouldn't even respond at all, or they would not show up after the estimate was accepted. It was insane. And so we had this hole in our wall in our pantry, and the entire pantry contents were in our spare bedroom for like 3 months. And we never found a plumber. We actually ended up having to pay somebody to close the hole back up, put the shelves back up, and then put all the contents back in. And so we never even completed that project. Now, we wanted to also completely overhaul and remodel our master bathroom, which would require a plumber. So now, our priority to overhaul our master bathroom is so low simply because the quality of the service for the plumbers that we were able to find in the area was so low that it has discouraged us from completing any project relating to plumbing. Now, will that happen in the car industry? Maybe, maybe not. But that's just an example of how a overall poor reputation in an area from one service industry can damage a client or a consumer's willingness to complete a project. And so that could happen with PPF, just like it happened with us with plumbing. Okay, so let's talk a couple examples of some crazy stuff I've seen recently. So I've seen, and I'm not just talking about people telling me prices, I'm talking about I have seen the quote from shops. So like signed quotes, like this is what we're gonna charge you. And I've seen full body PPF jobs that start as low as $5,500 for a 4-door car, including the roof, front and rear bumpers, everything. That's way low. I've seen full fronts discounted. A full front typically is mirror, hood, fenders, front bumper. Many people include the headlights, some don't. We don't typically do the headlights simply because there's risk of delamination in some cases, but we can add it on later. But anyways, that's a general full front. We've seen full fronts discounted as low as $1,100. I can't even imagine doing a full front for $1,100. We don't even do partial fronts for $1,100. So these prices are so low, and it's very attractive to somebody who is not familiar with the overall process for PPF. And so what we need to do is educate what's the difference between that $1,100 full front installation and our full front, which at the time of this video starts at $2,300. So, you know, what is the difference between those two full fronts? Well, let's dive into it and break down the costs. Okay, so for this example, for this discussion, I'm gonna use the ballpark of approximately $100 an hour for shop labor, and and most major respected brands are between $4.50 and $6 a square foot for PPF. So we'll just split the difference and we'll call it 5.25. Some people may be a little bit lower, some people may be higher. You can of course get super cheap brands for much less, but by and large, they're somewhere in that ballpark. They're somewhat close to 5.25 a square foot. Now we're gonna talk about the actual labor in the vehicle. Now, this is, you know, everybody has their methods and what they think they can do PPF in, but by and large, I think a lot of times people probably underestimate the amount of time it takes them to do something. You know, everybody has a different standard. You know, I can do a full front in X amount of hours, but does that include heating, trimming, tucking, plotting the material on our plotter, weeding out the excess material, throwing away stuff, cleaning up the shop, prepping the car? Not all the time. So what we're gonna use for this, and I budgeted 2 hours to prep the car. And that is, you know, the shop is cleaned up, you bring a new car in, you're washing the car, iron decontamination, clay bar, edge prepping the edges, disassembling badges. So like on the C8 Corvette, we remove the badge off the front bumper, cleaning up the residue from that, getting everything completely set up and ready to go. We're gonna talk 2 hours. Now some people say, you know, you're just washing a car, but a PPF external detail, exterior detail is a little bit more involved than your traditional wash, even if your wash is like super thorough, because we don't want debris coming from hidden areas such as behind the headlights. So there's like extra steps involved. We may be trying to get into the crevices, using a detail brush inside the crevices to dislodge dirt and get it out. We maybe do more pre-treatment and such. And again, these are steps that can be skipped to cut time and cut corners. And we're gonna budget approximately an hour for plotting and weeding and setting up and organizing our patterns. And so we use a software which costs us, $425 a month just for the software for PPF to print. And we're gonna print that on our 64-inch plotter, which is a $7,500 plotter. And we're gonna use our film. It's essentially like a big printer that kind of scores the film. And so it's gonna plot these patterns, and I'll show you some pictures here in a minute. And we then peel off, which is called weeding, but we peel off all this excess material. It's not part of the pattern. And then, we separate the patterns. We cut it with a razor blade, we roll it up, we tape it, we label it for efficiency purposes. This is the hood, this is the bumper, this is the left fender, right fender, so forth and so on. And that keeps us organized and keeps everything clean. Now, this will be the one thing where people will argue, but we're gonna talk about a 4-hour full front paint protection film install, hood, fenders, mirrors, front bumper. Now, some people may be able to cut that time down a little bit if it's a vehicle where, it's like all they do. So like it's just the same car day after day. Some cars are a little bit easier. Some people are able to install Teslas, a little bit faster than say like a Honda Civic or a Honda Accord, or, a Corvette, for example, is going to take longer than a Tesla. But we're going to use 4 hours as the general ballpark rule. Some cars may take longer, some cars may take a little bit shorter. And of course, if you're not being diligent in the install because you're trying to save time, you can definitely cut corners on that 4-hour install. But overall, I think people tend to brag about how fast they can do something, and I don't think it's always accurate. But I don't work in another shop. I just see and listen and observe, and some people are insanely fast at doing these cars. But 4 hours, that's our ballpark. And then we're gonna budget 1 hour for tucking, trimming, heating the edges. And what does that mean? So we have excess film, we're gonna trim it back. In that other video I mentioned earlier on, you can see where the other shop, they didn't trim like anything. They just folded it under the hood and let it go. So we're gonna trim it back. And then we're gonna heat those edges with a heat gun to ensure like maximum chance of, or minimal chance of lifting, maximal chance of adhesion. So we're gonna heat those edges. If there happens to be any air bubbles or anything like that, we're gonna pop that up. We're gonna make sure it's all dry. We're gonna clean the car because it does get like soap scum on it from spraying our solution, which has baby shampoo. So clean it up nice and neat, double check it, make sure there's no debris, or as little debris as possible. Heat the edges, trim the edges, tuck edges in that need to be tucked in, trim it back. Sometimes we hit it with a air gun, which kind of simulates like the wind speed hitting it and making sure that those edges are locked down and tucked under where possible. So, and then, we're gonna also like put badges back on. So at that point, we're retaping the C8 emblem, and perfectly aligning it, back into the center of the bumper, and, all those things that we would expect. And then cleaning up the car and getting that car ready for delivery. We're gonna budget an hour for that. Now, another cost that a lot of people probably don't factor in is the sales, scheduling, and follow-up after, and that all takes time, and time is money. So let's say, you're talking a client that calls you, knows that they want to book, there's no education needed, you're just scheduling them in. It takes 5-10 minutes, you're collecting a deposit, and you're scheduling, so it takes like 10 minutes. And then, you're spending 10 or 20 minutes throughout the whole process leading up to, follow up. Even though your appointment system is automated, you're still gonna spend some time following up, potentially sending pictures, checking in the car, talking to the client. So you got, another maybe 30 minutes total so far leading up to the install. And then, it's customary, you're going to deliver the car, you're going to talk to the client, and then also you're going to say 30 minutes, 2 weeks down the line. Sometimes you're going to, at the 2 week mark, you're going to need to bring the car in and just touch up some areas and, trim back some areas, maybe pop a bubble, tuck something in, just address any minor issues that have occurred over the first 2 weeks. 2 weeks is a pretty standard inspection period. Let's say all of that, which is about an hour's worth of work, but dependent upon who you're paying and how you're paying it, it could be, $50 if you're paying a salesperson, 5% commission or something, plus the time of the installer to do the tucking and trimming and all the follow-up, could be $100, $150. But we're just gonna say $50. So all that time, from all that extra conversation, all that extra scheduling, taking the deposit, managing the accounting of all of that, and tucking and trimming or follow up as needed on average. And some may take longer, some may take less. So we're just gonna say $50. So we're gonna use that as our general $50. I think it's pretty generous actually, in miscellaneous time booked. And time is money, and not accounting for that time per car results in hidden costs or decreased efficiency, which results in increased costs. So we're going to use for $50 for that. Okay, so for this example, we're going to use this 2024 Honda Accord hybrid touring that I did a couple weeks ago. It's actually an easier car with less pieces to do than the car I saw a quote for $1,100. Not like crazy different, but enough that this is a conservative estimate, right? So what we have, and I'm going to look at my numbers here just so I don't make a mistake, but what we have here is let's say we have an $1,100 gross ticket on this Honda Accord, if I charged $1,100. So most clients are going to pay with a credit card or some sort of processing fee, which is going to cost me 3%. So that's going to bring my profit immediately down to $1,067 to work with. All right. So the square footage for a 2024 Honda Accord hybrid touring is about 75.5 square feet, which works out to be about $396 in material, using that $5.25 figure that I came up with earlier, which is kind of an average of major brands. And again, you could go super cheap brands and cut corners with, not as good film, or you could get maybe even more expensive. But we're going to use $396 in material, which is going to give us $671 left. And so I'm going to budget around $15 a car in miscellaneous supplies expenses. So what does that mean? You're talking about like using a couple ounces of soap and wear and tear on tools and squeegees and foam cannons and detail brushes. These are all things that are relatively inexpensive. Blades, like knife blades. Honestly, $15 is probably a conservative estimate because blades aren't super cheap, and squeegees do wear out, and detail brushes and water, and deionized water is more expensive than just running tap water, and we're going to use deionized water. So $15 is probably super conservative, but that's what the number that we're going to use. So we're going to go at $15 there. And then now, whether you're paying somebody $100 an hour or you're factoring in $100 an hour for shop time, we've got the 1 hour or the 2 hours of prep, 4 hours of install, and then 1 hour finish. So it's going to cost us $700 in shop labor. And then the $50 miscellaneous time expense that I described before. So for that job, we are losing $94 on that job. If we're using that strictly shop labor, we're losing 94 hours. So I know some people are going to say like, well, that's not feasible. So I'm going to give you a couple alternative examples and show you what those pricing structures look like. So instead of billing $700 shop labor, that's a small shop where that's like me, where like I'm doing the prep work and all the work. So let's say, for example, you have a shop hand that you're paying $15 an hour, and they come in just to wash that car. You're going to be at $30 for them, so it saves you like $170 in skilled labor of prepping the car. Now, the prep work might not be as good because you got somebody who's just coming in and like briefly washing the car, and then you do that. So now, but if you do that, now you're actually gonna, make a little bit money. So you're gonna make about $75 on that car. But then now that you're making a profit, now you're gonna have to pay tax on that as a business, which can cost you 20%. And so the final number is about making $60 using that. Now, the other thing that factors that in that's conservative in estimate is, like, let's say you do, 3 full fronts a day, and it takes them 2 hours per car, that shop hand for $15, right? But they're here on the clock for 8 hours. That's another $30, split up amongst the cars that you're paying them idle time, cleanup time, whatever the case. So like, that's a conservative estimate, but we're just gonna use it strictly for the prep time. So that saves you a little bit of money. Now, the more extreme example to save money is, let's say you pay a shop hand $15 an hour to prep the car, but you pay your skilled labor commission only, and pretty much industry standard is about 20%. So now you're paying your installer $220 for a full front because you charge so low on the full front. It's $220. So instead of a higher number, and that makes you the most money by doing that structure, and that leaves you with a profit of about $356. But then you're going to pay 20% tax on that profit, and so now you're down to about a $285 profit. So our options are basically about $94 negative, about $60 profit, and about $285 profit. Okay, so now let's look at what are some negatives of making this little of profit or negative profit. So when we're talking about worker conditions, a lot of times race to the bottom, one of the big criticisms of races to the bottom pricing is worker conditions in the shop. So, the less you pay people, the worse the conditions are, the less likely people are going to be to put in effort and try to do a good job and, feel a part of the team. Turnover rate's going to be higher. If you have a higher turnover rate, that of course is going to cost money in the long run, because you're going to be retraining people, rehiring people, going through that whole process, more stress on yourself. So, the lower rates are going to cause less skill also. So, if somebody's is charging $2,000 for a full front and you're paying 20% commission, it's $400 a full front. People are making a lot more money than if you're charging such a low amount. Their commission is so much lower, but they're doing the same amount of work as somebody in a shop that's making more money or that's charging more money. And, it's easy to say maybe as a client, like, well, we don't want the shops to be greedy, but we want our workers to be happy, because workers being happy means good work. Good work means good product for you. Unhappy workers, unskilled workers means worse work for the client. And I mentioned this earlier, but a way to cut costs is to cut time. Time is, time and the raw material are the two big factors, right? But there's only so much time you can cut, and we saw, you see in a video, like, not finishing the car well or not prepping the car well leads to more debris. Not finishing the car well leads to terrible edges, or perhaps areas, like there's times where I'm like, I'm not satisfied with the way this looks. I may lift it back up and redo that section of the car. But if you're crunched for time and you just have to hammer it out, you're like, oh, that's good enough, And that's another cost that's not factored in anywhere above. Like, I didn't factor in my estimates waste, and occasionally you're going to waste panels, and you're going to have to reprint panels. So that $396 that I budgeted for the material, that means nothing can go wrong, right? And typically you're going to want to budget over 10%, 20%, as an average, just in case you have to throw a panel away, or maybe you print it, maybe you rip it, maybe it gets dropped. I mean, there's a million things that can happen. It doesn't happen often, but it's enough that you should budget for it. You can't budget just, to never make a mistake. That's not feasible. We're all humans. So, that's something to keep in mind. Another thing that you could do to cut costs, and I also mentioned this earlier, is you can, completely eliminate pieces. So in one of the installs, it was advertised as a full front, and they didn't include the mirrors. And we charge $200 for mirrors by ballpark. So, you can cut $200 by not including the mirrors. But in this case, they included the headlights. So, it's still time and money there. And of course, like I said, we can get more unskilled labor, which is going to save us money, but it's going to result in a lower product. And, you could do things like skip wrapping edges entirely. You could just lay it down and be done. But I actually find, the wrapped edges wherever possible is extremely better. And then, finding those installers that are willing to work for super cheap might be hard. I mean, you may not even be able to compete with that price or compete at that price for a long time, because trying to find somebody to take a nearly 50% pay cut to work for you and do the same amount of work, assuming skills are the same, is going to be really difficult. And another thing I've seen some shops do, super shady, but they'll advertise an expensive film, but we know that they're using a cheaper film. And initially it's hard to tell, honestly. But long term, it's not a good thing. It's not a good look. It's not a good look for warranty either, because they're going to carry a different warranty. So, they may advertise this like really expensive brand, but in the background, they're ordering much cheaper material to try to save costs. It happens. Unfortunately, we don't do that. We use all Autobahn Incognito PPF. It's a high quality lifetime warranty, but it is possible for people to sneak that in, so to speak. And then again, some shops, one thing that we get a lot of great reviews on is communication and follow-up and all of the parts of the job that are, really customer service focused based, client satisfaction based. And, you can cut costs by eliminating that. It's like, we're only going to schedule you in. I don't have time to talk to you. We're going to bring it in, drop your car off, drop your keys off. I'm never going to talk to you again. And we're not going to follow up with you. We're never going to touch base to see how the install looks 2 weeks down the line. We don't care if you return for business, because we're not putting any effort whatsoever into that, into that client satisfaction. And even for us, one thing that I do at the end of all of my PPF installs is I provide about, $40 worth of product to you to get you started taking care of drying towels, glass cleaning towel, microfiber towel, little microfiber bag, pens, all this stuff, some soap to get you through the first couple of washes. That's just included in the price. So when you leave here, you have some products to wash your car with, and kind of general maintenance and wipe up your car and convenience sake, and that all costs money, but you could just hand the keys and be done. So hopefully, this long video, I realize it's a long video, but hopefully this long video will help you see the negatives of buying by price only, or by reducing your prices to such an extent that you're trying to undercut every shop in the area. You see how it could impact the PPF industry as a whole, client satisfaction as a whole, and client willingness to purchase PPF in the future, the reputation of PPF. And these are people that care about their cars significantly enough to spend a couple $1,000s to protect it. And with inflated car prices now, tens of thousands of dollars to buy the car in the first place, we want to make sure we take care of them, and we want to make sure we're factoring in all those little costs that maybe people are just winging and not thinking about, and then wondering why their bottom, why their profit margin is so low overall as a business. So I hope this video helped. Let me know what you think. Let me know your arguments for or against in the comments.